All right, my friends, welcome back to another edition of the Build Show Live. That's right, we got a webinar today, friends, and we are talking about a really fun topic. We're talking about waterproof decks, specifically a product called Duradek. I've got Bill Shank with me here. Bill, your title is head trainer? Is
Head trainer in the U.S., yes.
Head trainer in the whole U.S. And by the way, they also sell this quite a bit. This is very popular in Canada as well. So really, this is a whole North America webinar here. First off, Bill, I appreciate that you are just as nerdy as I am, and they didn't send somebody who hadn't used the product for literally 30 years, right, Bill?
Yep, it's been close to 30.
Bill and I were talking prior to this. He started using the product when I was still in high school, and he's got a couple years on me. So we got the right guy to really walk us through the product. But Bill, before we jump into Duradek and all the 411s about it, I do want to tell those who are watching live that if you've got a question for Bill and I, go ahead and use the Q&A tab. On the webinar that you're watching this on, there's a Q&A tab. Bill and I are going to leave at least the last 10 or maybe 15 minutes of the presentation for Q&A time. So anything that comes up while we're talking, hit it on the Q&A tab. I've got that live here that I'll be able to look at. And we do have a couple people behind the scenes if you've got a specific Duradek question maybe to answer. But obviously a sponsored video, but we're going to be jumping into all kinds of things that I think are going to be good for you no matter what deck system you might end up using on your projects. This is going to be some really good information for you. So, Bill, before we jump into the specifics of your system, how about we show some ugly photos?
Yeah, that looks like a chemically welded seam right there.
Yeah, I think anybody who's been in the construction industry for more than a minute has seen some type of flat deck failure, right?
Yeah, those seams don't last too long.
No, they definitely don't. What are we looking at here, Bill?
And that's someone who really wasn't trained too well to do their job.
That looks like a downspout going through a waterproof deck. That's not a good idea. That's not an authorized use of really anybody's product, especially yours.
Yeah, there's ways to do it, and that certainly isn't the way to do it.
No, that's definitely not the way to do it. How about this, Bill?
That's a split seam on the outside of a post. So that should have had what we refer to as a Band-Aid. So it's an extra piece of vinyl that gets welded over top of that because all the vinyl shrinks. You just don't know it if you mechanically fasten it like you're supposed to. So if that had a Band-Aid around it on top of it, that wouldn't have happened right there.
We've all seen this one. This is pretty usual. This is some random caulking by some homeowner, by some handyman, and someone said, oh, I got this problem, I got this leak on my waterproof deck. Oh, no problem, let me grab this painter's caulking.
It looks like latex caulking, doesn't it?
Not good.
No.
Not good. When you see that, you know that we got bigger problems.
That's it.
That's never solved someone's waterproof deck issue. What the heck are we seeing here?
That's a homemade scupper, it looks like to me. I don't even think there's a scupper in there. I just think the vinyl just ran through the wall and they put a bunch of silicone on there.
Oh my gosh, with brick molding and a head flashing on there too. They wanted it to look nice, so they put the brick mold on there.
Well, they mitered their corners pretty good.
Yeah, so. They did do a nice miter. Pretty bad. Ponding. This is another issue that is seen a lot on flat roofs.
Yeah, that's probably the number one callback is ponding water. So water management is very important.
Yeah.
They should have diverted that water over to where it's supposed to go out in that scupper right there.
We're going to get into this a little later, but any flat roof needs some slope on it. So when we say flat, that's really a misnomer, right?
Right.
None of these roofs should actually be flat.
No, it should be 2% or 1/4 inch per foot slope.
Okay, so if we've got our level, every 1 foot that level goes on a roof, we should see a 1/4 inch underneath that level in slope, in drop towards a drainage area, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh, what are we seeing here, Bill?
That looks like they made an attempt to go underneath the door, and they didn't really, they should have welded all that together. I don't know if there's anything under the door, but they certainly didn't treat that like they should have. That should have been welded. Yeah.
You think the number one callback is ponding water. I would have said number one, or easily right behind it, number two, would be leaks at doors onto flat roofs.
Yep.
I think another big issue here is that there's not enough room between the bottom of that sill and the deck. Obviously, I can't measure, but that looks to me like maybe it's 2 inches from the top of the deck to the bottom of the sill. It's just not enough room to get all the flashing in there to do that correctly. And we're going to show you later how to do it right. We got a great mock-up for you here too, but boy, those doors, you've got to really treat those correctly. You can't mess around and try and put a new deck in without pulling a door too.
Right. You got to go under the door with it.
That's right. And then, of course, when we do it wrong, what do we find underneath?
There's the rot. There's the post flashing gone bad. They just left the post with the collar around it and called it done.
Oh my gosh! I mean, pretty bad. What do you think the cause on this failure was?
That goes back to the door situation. They just ran the vinyl up to the door sill, put some caulk on there. They probably didn't put any termination bar or L trim.
Yeah.
So the vinyl shrunk, it pulled away from the wall, and the doors leak. They get behind the vinyl, and then it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, so if I could point to this photo, you can't see, you know, I guess now I can't use my mouse on here. You're basically seeing that doorway, and that dark stain is right at the door spot.
Right, because that's where it leaks, right
so
at the corners of the door first.
Yep, makes perfect sense that that's what you're seeing there. Now, what's this image? Did you take this picture?
Yeah, I got called on a job in Wilmington, North Carolina. The installer didn't really want to put his plywood down, so the builder put the good plywood down. But before he did that, he put titanium felt over the room below so he could continue work, which is pretty standard.
So in other words, a temporary waterproofing.
Yeah, temporary waterproof so he could continue on. Had a 3.5-inch step, which is really ideal. So the builder chose to put a 2x4 flat, and the deck had walls on both sides. So he ran it from wall to wall. And his only reasoning for doing that was just to raise it up 1.5 inches. So he put his good layer of plywood back down over top of it, called the installer, said, hey, I'm ready, I've got your plywood down. And he did not know what was underneath there. Now, even if he hadn't put the titanium felt, that would have happened. This happened in about 1.5 years. It may have taken 2 years to do without the felt in there, but they're going to be pretty close to each other.
Holy cow.
Yeah, condensation gets in there and it rots the plywood above. So had he run it the other way and vented it out where it drains out, wouldn't have been an issue.
So this is a building science error. I mean, we've got a trapped airspace that isn't ventilated.
Right.
And this is a great reminder that anytime we have unventilated spaces, we can have condensation. That condensation can lead to rot. And so whenever we've got an airspace in a house, we need to ventilate those. That's really important for any builder, whether we're talking about flat roofs or whether we're talking about soffits or fascias or anything on houses. That's an ugly example and only a
yeah,
short
it's always
amount of
good to know what you're installing on.
And we'll end with this beauty. What in the heck are we seeing here?
Looks like a poor man's scupper to me. They went and found a piece of pipe, stuck it in a wall, and glued up to it and caulked it. And you can see where the hole saw went crazy on the trim.
Oh my gosh, that is terrible.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears, Bill. We've seen some ugly photos. How about we show these guys how to do a proper waterproof deck with your Duradek system.
Right.
So let's I'm gonna switch gears on my my little audio video feed here, and let's see. No, that's not this video. Sorry guys, 1 second. Let me switch my video feed. Let's do it here. Talk to me about the installation sequence. What are we looking at here?
The first thing they do is they come and they put an acceptable layer of plywood, which is BC grade or better plywood, down for the Duradek. And
okay, so not OSB.
Right, not OSB, not Advantech or any. Those are petroleum-based products, and they don't interact well with the plasticizers and the vinyl.
Okay, so we need that true wood surface.
Yes, you do. It has to be an exterior grade plywood. And then they flash patch the seams with an Duradek feather finish. If you're in colder climates, you can use Bondo if you're good with that, if you know how to mix a hardener. So you can certainly use that, but you can't go to Home Depot and just buy rock hard or some other type of floor leveler, because we test everything that goes in our system. We test everything to make sure it doesn't have any adverse effect on it.
Yeah, and I would say you're not the only manufacturer that requires that true plywood surface. There's other manufacturers of flat roof products or that are liquid applied, and some others that require this plywood. So that's something to be cautious with for my builder audience out there. Remember, if you've got these flat roofs, you're going to probably need an AC or a BC plywood. This to me looks like an AC plywood. I don't see any footballs. I don't see any
it looks really
knots.
good plywood. The better the plywood, the easier the install.
Now, if we had footballs or knots, what would this installer do to prepare it?
Zinzerbin makes a shellac-based primer. That is, you put 2 coats on that over the knot holes. If the knot holes are deep, you fill them up with floor leather, then you coat it with that. Their oil-based doesn't work. Their water-based doesn't work. Kills doesn't work. What we know that works is Zinzerbin shellac-based primer.
Shellac-based,
yes.
from the beetle.
Actually, there you go.
It's a secretion from a beetle. Crazy enough. And if you weren't doing that, if you were out on a job and they didn't do that, what would be the problem?
The tanning oils in the knots would bleed through the Duradek.
Okay.
And it would create a brown spot. You could
Gotcha.
clean it off, and then probably a few hours later, probably the next morning, it would show back up if you could get it completely cleaned off.
So it can actually bleed through.
It bleeds through, and it
the
just
PVC.
There's nothing that you can do.
Okay, so prep's important, and then after they've got that prepped, what's the next step?
They sand it down like they would drywall. I'm sorry, yeah. They sand it down like they do drywall, get the seam smooth, and now you lay out your vinyl in whichever direction is going to go good with the deck that you have. They lay the vinyl out. That's the roll into method, or you can do a flop and fold method. But right there, they're laying the vinyl out. They're using latex in the field. And
Okay.
they're doing the roll into method.
And what is that, a 6-foot or a 10-foot roll? What am I
It's
seeing
6
there?
foot wide, and it comes 75 feet long, and we sell it in yards, so it's 25 yards. So
Okay, so
3
if you've
foot.
got a deck that's bigger than 6 foot in one dimension, you're going to have a seam somewhere.
Right. Usually you run your seams. You don't want to have T-seams or anything like that. So,
Right.
so you want to run a complete seam all the way across the deck, or cover the deck with, individual seams like that.
Gotcha. Okay, and then this is actually a fully adhered system as well, right?
Right,
It's not loose laid.
100% glued. Yep. So you can use all contact cement. That last picture was the flop and fold method, and probably the most important part is the heat welding. So that's what you have to be trained to learn how to heat weld.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot that goes into that.
So those seams where that 6-foot sheet overlaps, I think you said by 3/4 of an inch, you're not relying on adhesive in
No.
there. You're actually using a tool, and we've got a video to show how cool it is when they actually use that tool. But that's kind of like a glorified heat gun that's intended to heat weld those seams, and it's actually making the material bond to itself, right?
It melts it together. It's a hairdryer on steroids.
That's pretty cool. Okay, let's transfer over to this house and walk me through this kind of case study. Now, this is not new construction. This is a change out. And what we're seeing there is a previous roof. So what was that previous roof?
It was a TPO roof, and it was pretty unusable. Well, by code, unusable, period. Wasn't meant to be walked on.
So TPO in general is not a walkable surface, correct?
No.
It's not intended to be a walk-on.
Not at all.
So if you're gonna do a deck on TPO, you need to take a bunch of precautions and you need to put another surface on top of it.
Right.
And I think that's a big selling point of Duradek is your product is not only the waterproof membrane, but it is code approved to be a walking surface.
Right, exactly.
And not only that, TPO is pretty darn slick when it's wet, right?
Yeah, that's another reason it can't be walked on. It's usually put over a fiberboard too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not put on plywood like Duradek is.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is a project that also had some other issues with ponding and some other deals. But my guess is that furniture could have also made some holes or rips or tears in that TPO
absolutely.
too, right?
Yeah, that almost looks like they put a little coating of rubber on there as well.
Yeah, to try and protect that TPO
Right.
maybe. Okay, so then first step for this contractor to put a Duradek down, obviously they're pulling everything apart.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can fast forward a little bit on this video, you're going to see that they also had to do some additional sloping in the field. Is that pretty typical when you're doing
Yeah, it
re-roofs?
is pretty typical.
Yeah.
So you still want your 1/4 inch per foot, your 2% slope, and there's some pretty good looking plywood right
Yeah,
there.
there's definitely some damage on that one for sure.
You can see the plywood they're putting down is a nice plywood.
Mm-hmm. And they're putting some new sleepers down. You're going to see on this next photo in a second here.
Yeah.
Interesting to see that these sleepers you're going to see in a second seem to be oriented in the direction of the Here, I'm going to pause this video right there. They seem to be oriented in the direction of where the water's falling.
Right.
Are they providing airflow in there? I guess it's hard to tell on this
Yeah,
video.
once the drip edge gets put on there, there's going to be some airflow in there, unlike the one in Wilmington that ran wall to wall.
Right.
And there was no way for air to get in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're thinking about how they're actually doing that. And they're putting new CDX on top of that.
No, BC,
or not, I'm sorry, not CDX,
BC grade. Yep.
Actually, that looks like an A face to me.
Yep. It probably is. A lot of installers use the A grade plywood.
Yeah. But just less prep, so there's less time involved, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then they prep it with the Hardex. They sand it down pretty much like you would drywall. You don't want the seams to telegraph through. You don't want to even feel the seams.
Got it.
So you sand that down.
And Ardex is the same product that I've seen my hardwood guys use, right?
Yep, it's a very good product.
A good
Very
floor
good.
leveler float system.
Yep. Very good.
Almost like you're doing drywall mode out there. In fact, on this photo, you can see it's still wet. It looks like on those seams, it's still drying out. We're going to talk about this later, but if you guys are interested and you're watching this, you can get a full architectural binder from these guys if you want full samples of Duradek, all these drawings, all the details. They've got a binder. We'll tell you a little bit later. Now, how were they adhering this particular deck?
This one was all contact cement. And if you note on the side wall, which was the where the wall coping was, they put plywood on there as opposed to going up the dimensional lumber so they get a smooth surface when it was finished. So this one was done with all contact cement.
Gotcha. And why would an installer want to use contact cement versus the water-based adhesive?
Most of your roofers are used to contact cement, okay, so that's what they're going to go with. Contact cement is more user-friendly in colder weather. You can use it on every surface on the deck. Latex cannot go on metal or anything like that. The latex is a little bit stronger than contact cement. So if you use latex, you're going to be using the contact cement on the perimeter. So that gets you a nice fold and that gets you that immediate stick. Takes a little bit longer for latex to dry.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But it's probably a little easier to work too, I suspect.
It's easier to work when the fact that you can pick it up and relay it. Once you stick it down, you can't really shift the vinyl. It's not that slick.
Yeah.
But you can pull it up while it's still wet.
Gotcha. Now, this is interesting. I didn't expect to see that term. Normally, when I think of a termination bar, I'm thinking of something that's going up the wall and we're sticking it onto the wall so it doesn't slide off.
Right.
But this termination bar looks to be in that
Almost
what
like
am I
a
saying?
baseboard.
Inside corner.
Right.
What's the purpose of that? That seems like that'd be a leak issue for me.
No, that mechanically fastens it. So the first place the vinyl wants to pull away is right there at the corner. We call it tinning. So it's going to pull away from that, especially when you're using contact cement because it doesn't hold as well as the latex.
Ah.
So that is a termination bar. It's 1.5 inches tall, and it has a butyl tape on the back of it. So when the screws go through, and it comes in 6 different colors, so it's going to match whichever color or coordinate whichever color you're going to use.
Gotcha.
And the screw goes through the butyl tape, and it completely seals up that screw.
Huh.
I've never, in 30 years, I've never seen a leak if that's installed correctly.
Wow.
Commercial, we have a mini trim, so if you have a commercial job where they require 2 termination bars, then we would put a smaller L trim at the top of the vinyl too, so it holds it. You know, usually commercial jobs, government jobs, they want 2 termination bars.
Gotcha. So they've got a double.
Right.
By the way, nice cap on that project.
Oh,
Kudos
looks
to
good.
that contractor. That's
Yep.
really nice looking. That's handsome with that white. Talk to me about these 2 terminations. You got a PVC pipe there, and it looks to be a metal flue. Any issues with bonding to PVC or metal?
No, PVC, no. Actually, the PVC trim boards that you can buy, the vinyl can be welded directly to it.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So that, I mean, that you would caulk the top of that. It is a maintenance thing that you have to be aware of. So you have to check your caulking every year.
Okay.
But it just glued around. That's a 1-piece collar, and it welds 3/4 of an inch to the floor.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see, is there any other images from this? I think the rest of these images are mainly kind of coping and...
The rest of it is, and I think it shows our railing system on there too.
Oh, is that your railing system? Okay, we're going to get into that. We got some photos of that later. I'm actually going to pause this in the interest of time to make sure that we get to that, because I want to show some of your railing system. But next, let's switch gears and let's talk about this awesome mock-up that you brought in your suitcase underneath the plane to come to me here in Austin, Texas. I bet the airline loved that one.
Yeah, they did.
So we've got two things going on here, if I can narrate from my side. It looks like a Duradek install that actually has an internal drain. And then we're going to get into this too. This is a version of Duradek, right?
Yeah, it's called Tile Deck. We came out with that in 2009. So that has a textile top to it that the thin set sticks to.
Okay, so this is the same basic PVC membrane as your Duradek, but a fleece top.
Right.
So now when I mastic on top of that, I could actually have a tiled surface.
Exactly.
And I would suspect, because there's no UV rays hitting this, this would be a really long-lasting roof.
Yeah, it doesn't shrink because it is protected from the UV rays.
Yeah.
It goes over top of cement board. You can put it over plywood. Most of your tile guys would like to see you put it over cement board. And they put that in thin set to make it a little bit stronger. And it's welded, those seams are welded an 1.5 inches wide. So there's a lot of nuances with Tile Deck that are very much like TPO. We have safety strips up the wall, and any detail patches, outside corners have an extra Band-Aid strip on each side.
Yep.
So little built-in redundancies. We want to make sure it doesn't leak, because if it leaks because of an install problem, there's a huge expense.
Yeah, to get that tile up and figure out what the problem is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Talk me through some of the details on here.
Well, we have two types of seams. We have a regular seam that's overlapped by 3/4 of an inch, and we have a recess seam. So we can recess your seams. We route out a channel in the plywood so the seam is virtually flat.
Oh, check that out. That's cool.
So there's two different ways of doing it.
Huh, that's going to be really hard to tell on the camera, but that's pretty neat on this, on this display.
This is our galvanized drip and clip system. The vinyl wraps over 2 inches. It gets folded behind there, and 2 layers of it keeps this clip on.
Gotcha.
We also have a PVC drip edge. Comes in 6 different colors. So if you don't want to see the vinyl and you just want a nice, you want it to coordinate with your trim, then you can use the PVC drip edge.
That's nice.
And that's typically what you use with the Tile Deck. You terminate it on the side.
Okay.
On the top like that.
Got it.
Over here's termination bar. Our L trim, you can also actually put termination bar to mechanically fasten on the outside with that too.
Okay.
Our collars are one-piece collars. So they're wrapped around, they're made in the field.
Okay, so that's a one-piece.
That's one-piece collar, and it laps 3/4 of an inch on the floor, and it gets heat welded to the floor.
Oh, neat.
So that's, you know, we've learned how to flex it around there so you don't have any corner patches there. Once your house wrap goes around the post and it's cladded, and you put you seal the top edge of the deck, the Duradek, we treat it just like a wall.
Yeah. So we want to go up at least 6 inches.
Probably, at least 6 inches, yeah, on the collar.
Makes sense.
Our drains are recessed, so we have a 2-inch and a 3-inch drain. They have a locking clamp in them. So you take the locking ring out, you put your Duradek in there, you put caulk in there, you sandwich the caulk in there, and you put that down.
And then it mechanically adheres
and
in there.
Mechanically fastens it there. We have, I don't know if they can see it here, we have a scupper, a PVC-coated scupper right here.
And that comes from Duradek as well?
That comes from Duradek. And you can get a bigger scupper, 4x8 made, as long as it's a PVC-coated metal. We do sell the metal.
So
in bigger
PVC
sheets.
coated, meaning now I can actually physically bond, heat weld my Duradek material to that scupper.
Right. You don't want
nice.
to terminate it in there with caulk and glue, because it will, once it shrinks, it's going to pull off, and that'll probably take about a week.
Wow.
For that to pull away and separate. The scupper's going to get hot. It's going to expand and contract. It's just going to pop everything loose. We also have the copper emergency overflows, and they're PVC coated as well.
Oh, wow.
So the vinyl gets welded to that, and you have to have an emergency overflow in the event that you have a drain, in case the drain gets clogged.
Yeah, smart.
PVC scuppers, you don't usually have to have an overflow. I have seen more and more of that in my travels, where they do have emergency overflows with scuppers now.
Even with scuppers.
So maybe something that, it may all depend on the size of the scupper too.
Yeah.
4x4 is usually a minimum per code. And the door opening.
Yeah, so this is meant to show a door opening. You got kind of a cutaway of a door right there.
So we like to wrap the vinyl up and into the door opening, and we put a wall patch on the side right there.
Yep.
And then the house wrap goes over that, and you put your door pan over that, and you've got a pretty watertight system right there.
You know, I want to slow you down on that, because you said it quickly, and I know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure everybody heard him. that Duradek is going on prior to the exterior door being set. So the door is not in place. The Duradek goes on, that way they can weld everything correctly. That inside corner is sealed from the roofer. And then when the builder has whoever, his finished carpenter or whomever, come and set that door, there's also a pan that door is set in, so that any water that leaks in the sill, like this spot right here is real vulnerable, it's going to leak down into the pan and run out. So you've got that double layer of protection. You've got a belt on and you put suspenders on.
And we actually have a way to pre-flash the doors. So you can make a jig and you can actually make the door flashing. So the builder can put the door in. The door flashing's in, the vinyl turns down the vertical side of the wall, and then he can put his doors and windows in and get everything buttoned up top. And then when it's time for the Duradek and they have the trim on, we can bring our Duradek in, shingle it behind the door flashing, and then we weld that to that, unlike that picture you saw in the disasters where they didn't weld something right there.
Yeah, that's right.
So that would be welded, and then that would be covered with trim, and you'd be good to go. So you could do it before that.
And Bill, what's your advice on this distance from the top of the deck to the top of the sill? What do you want to see there?
Typically 3.5. I think, a lot of codes, they like you to go 6 inches, but that's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
So
that's a big step.
Choke it down to 3.5 and you're good. We do have to go in accessible door openings. So there are some that are 1 inch off the floor.
Woo.
Yeah, some are right down on the floor.
That's tight.
And you're really limited to how you can waterproof that. As long as you go under the door, you do everything right with your door pan and set it, you're pretty good.
Yeah, you better put a big overhang on that door too.
Yeah, exactly. It should be under an overhang. But you're typically, most of the time it's going to be about 3.5 inch step up there. That's perfect. That's an ideal. 2 inches is almost a trip hazard.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
It's kind of a side note, but at my house, Bill, I've got a pretty low threshold to an outside patio. It's not even a waterproof deck; it's a patio. And I've got a first floor door with a second story that has an overhang. And I thought, well, I really don't want water running down the face of that door. And maybe getting in. So I did a 4-foot overhang awning on top of that door that I built. And then I also put a gutter on that awning.
Yeah.
So now even in the craziest wind and rainstorm, I still don't get any water on that door.
Yep.
And so I'd highly encourage builders that if you have exterior doors, even if you have an overhang, consider an awning for that. We don't want water in that location.
Right. And overhang does make a big difference.
Overhang makes a big difference. Anything we missed on that mock-up?
I don't think we did.
That's a good mock-up.
We show our outside corners. That's our outside corner patch. All our detail patches are designed to be 3/4 inch weld. Everything is 3/4 of an inch. Makes it possible to bend the vinyl around.
Yep.
And when your cladding goes down to your trim, it gets hidden.
Yeah, that's really good.
So
I'm not sure if we said this, but I think this feels like a good point to interject here. I mentioned earlier Bill's the head trainer for Duradek. This is not a DIY system. This is not something you're picking up at the home center and you're watching this video to learn how to install it this weekend. They have a great training program. They have installers all over North America. And I wasn't going to show this till later, but while I'm on the thought, let me show you their website, which is just duradek.com. You can go ahead and put your zip code in and use a little search button that says how far away do you want to look. So I inputted the zip code for my office here, 78759, and look, I got 4 dealers: Lone Star Duradek, who actually has multiple locations, and Roof Maintenance Systems LLC. These are trained installers that I'm going to get a 15-year warranty from them when they install this Duradek on my project. Right. Anything I missed on that?
You'll get a 15-year warranty from Duradek, and the installer will give you their warranty, which is anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending on the installer. And our warranty is transferable. So it doesn't matter how many homeowners go in there during the warranty period, because we warranty the product, not the homeowner.
Yep.
And it also has a 5-year appearance warranty on it.
That's awesome. Very cool. One last video I want to mention, and then let's jump into a couple other products and details. We haven't shown these guys yet this heat welding process. Let me show you this video, guys. This is pretty cool. Walk me through what we're seeing here.
All right, there's 3 parts to doing a seam. First, you do a back weld, and that basically traps the heat in the seam where you want it to go. So you're welding the back of the bottom piece of the vinyl to the top layer. Now you do your seam weld. So your vinyl gets heated. You're usually doing about 2 feet or so, whatever you can reach where you're sitting down welding. And you weld your seam like that. That's your seam weld. Then you're going to come back and cap weld it, which kind of bevels the edge, and it encases the backing in there so it doesn't wick up water.
So when you say cap welder, that's this thing right
yeah,
here. It kind of looks like a quarter.
Yeah,
we
call it a penny roller.
Penny roller, okay.
And that puts a beveled edge there. And what that penny roller does, it actually takes the bleed out that you'll see, and it actually brings the pattern of the vinyl over the bleed out, so it's virtually invisible.
That seam is really invisible.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
impressive.
it looks good. And the 3/4 inch seam looks really good. And you want to cap weld while it's hot, so that's why you do about 2 feet or whatever you're comfortable sitting welding, you do that. You back weld, you seam weld, you cap weld, you check everything, and then you move on.
How long does it take your installers to learn that process? Is that pretty tricky, or can they get it down after doing it a
No,
few
it's pretty
times?
tricky. I mean, even the TPO guys, they weld really well, and then they watch you cap and they say, well, that looks easy, and then they struggle with it. And it's just something that they haven't done before.
Yeah.
So it takes, some people just flat out don't get it.
Something
and
new.
It takes a little bit of time. They have to do a lot of seaming before we set them loose on the job.
Yeah. You mentioned TPO. This is something I was going to get into later, but while you're at it, let's talk about it for a minute. A lot of builders in Texas use TPO roofs as kind of their standard, and some of them are in non-walkable areas. On the top of a second or third story that's not going to see any traffic. But a lot of them are places that, have a door outside, and they'll say to their inspector, well, we're going to keep that door locked. No one's going to go out there. But we all know that, just like we saw in your video, people are putting patio furniture out there. It can get surfaces walked on. Compare Duradek to TPO.
Duradek, you can actually walk on it, okay? So it is a walkable surface, and it is approved to go over living space just like the TPO. But the Duradek goes down on plywood, which adds to its strength, and the TPO goes down over fiberboard. So if you did do a TPO, you would have to put some sort of system on top, like a wood deck or a pedestal system with tiles and pavers and whatnot, so you couldn't walk on it. And that raises your door height. Okay, so if you're going to put a sleeper deck on there 3-4 inches, now you got to raise your door that much more. So Duradek eliminates that, so you don't have to do that. And Duradek's actually 70% lighter with the plywood than a protected roof membrane system with pavers or a deck on top of it.
That makes sense.
So when you put TPO on, and then you're upwards of $30-some a foot for Trex decking a foot.
Yeah.
You put that on top of that, and you're way higher than what a Duradek would cost.
They're going to be a lot more expensive. But Duradek probably is, in general, more expensive than a TPO roof,
It is.
right?
It is more expensive than just TPO.
Yeah.
But it serves the double purpose.
But two things I want to point out. It is also can be a thicker material. This is a 60 mil thickness material, and you can get TPO at, I think, 3 different thicknesses. Is that true? 40, 60, 80? And so that's something to keep in mind, by the way, contractor friends. I'd stay away from that 40 mil thick. That's a really thin millage.
Yeah.
If you're going to use TPO, you want to think about a 60 or an 80. You're also going to get a longer warranty from that. But this is a different material. This is a PVC material, and I've used a lot of PVC roof membranes over the years. The thing that really sells me on it is, when was the last time you saw a rotted PVC pipe sticking through an old house, right? I mean, that PVC takes the UV rays and doesn't get damaged.
Right.
And that's the same material that this is made from.
Right. And you can actually top this with another layer of Duradek 20 years down the road.
You could.
You can actually top it. You can cut your seams out. You can create a recessed seam at that point if you cut your seams completely out, so the vinyl can be glued down to the actual existing layer. It'll be power washed and primed with the shellac primer, and you can put another coat on there.
Pretty neat.
Yep.
Let's switch gears and show these guys a couple images of some good photos now for a change, rather than some bad photos. Walk me through what we're seeing here.
That's a water diverter. So we put our drip edge on, and then we have pre-manufactured diverters that we put on top of the drip edge. And what that does is, when the water flows off the deck, because there's a lot of water that comes off a flat deck like this.
Yeah.
And it diverts it away from the wall system.
Got it. That's really good. Oh, baby, look at that.
Yep.
That's a nice nice door sill right there. We got at least 4, 5, 6 inches up on that one, don't we?
That's our door opening. We go up in there, and then the house wrap goes around it.
Yep. And this photo, talk me through what we're seeing here.
So when the vinyl goes up the outside wall, it gets cut straight with that side jamb, and then the vinyl gets folded over on the jamb, and then there's a square that gets glued to the side jamb and welded 3/4 of an inch on top of the jamb and 3/4 on the face, and then it melts around that corner pretty well.
Yeah, that looks good.
So that seals that up, because that's the first place you're going to see a leak is right there by the brick mold on either side of the door.
Yeah, that's right.
And the tape, you want to seal the top of the edge of the Duradek. So you can either use caulk or the zip system tape works really well. What you don't want to use is an asphalt-based product like Protecto Wrap or something like that.
Right, or Vicor or something that's they got an asphaltic base.
Any asphalt-based product. Duradek has plasticizers, which makes it really soft. You can wad it up in a ball and it won't break, it won't crack. And those plasticizers actually migrate into that asphalt-based tape and they cause it to run. So you just dripping tar down the face of it.
I've seen that before. It's pretty ugly.
Yeah, and you can't clean it off.
It's a chemical incompatibility.
Yeah,
ultimately.
exactly.
So when you're seeing, I don't know what that red tape is, but when you're seeing that top of Duradek, you want to tape it with an acrylic tape, like zip system tape, or butyl tape would work too, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no issues with it with butyl.
It's always
tape.
good to check with the manufacturer, but for the most part, a butyl tape is zip system works great.
Yeah,
it's thin. It's great to go around posts. It doesn't interfere with a post sleeve. Zip system works great.
Now you're showing plywood in this photo, the top where that red tape is, but if that was zip system sheathing, could we tape right to that and put our Duradek right up to that, or is there any other precautions?
You'd have to separate it, because when that gets wet to condensation and whatnot, the color in it seems to run, and it goes down and it interacts with the contact cement, so you'll have a dark strip. So it does have an interaction with it. It's not compatible, so you would separate that with a thin sheet metal.
Okay. You know, I wonder if you could also use, they make zip system tape in a 6-inch wide and 12-inch wide. I wonder if you could also use zip system tape as a separator.
I don't know if I'd go that far with it. I would go with the metal.
Go with the metal?
I feel more secure with the glue going on the metal than I would the zip system tape.
Because we're gluing it on.
Zip system tape over top of the vinyl, I don't have a problem with, but gluing it there,
underneath.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
That makes sense. Okay, got it. Smart. Looks like a nice big opening that's been flashed well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a minute and advise people on the construction sequencing process. We mentioned that failure earlier of somebody that did a temporary waterproofing but then laid sleepers and another deck on top, which we're not going to do. But what if we need some temporary waterproofing on this flat deck under construction? What would you recommend?
To keep it watertight until the Duradek gets put on, I've seen a lot of guys just use rubber. They'll just lightly attach the rubber roof to it.
Okay.
They can glue it down in, a couple strips of contact cement.
Yeah.
It's easy to pull off. It's very effective. Plastic is not. So if you want to keep it waterproof for a long time, I would say rubber would probably be your best to protect the plywood.
Yeah.
Builders usually use Advantech plywood now, which is great. Holds up to the weather. So if they use that, I'm not really worried about the plywood going bad unless it sits for 3 years.
Or you could use a zip system roof as a temporary roof, right? Tape all those seams, knowing that you're going to come in and put a 3/4 AC or BC on top of that.
You'd want to remove that tape. Anything that you put on that plywood, you want to remove.
I'm saying underneath that plywood, so the plywood would totally cover it. So if you had, pretend like that Duradek right there was just, 5/8 the brown zip system with taping just as a temporary roof. Then you'd come in on top of that and put your 3/4 on top of that, which is your real roof, and then your Duradek. That could be an option too, right?
Yeah, sometimes the zip system has some waterproofing qualities in there that you really don't want underneath there, because you don't want to trap plywood in between two moisture barriers.
That's a good point.
So if it acts as a moisture barrier, you're better off keeping your zip system on the wall and putting Advantech down.
And then putting your 3/4 plywood down.
And
that's smart.
really, the builders don't want to put the good plywood down because it does not last in the rain. After about two 2 or 3 rains, it's pretty much trash.
Yeah, you want to put that down right before the Duradek goes in.
And that's better to have them to install or put it down than it is the builder.
That's great advice. And then let's say that this Duradek goes down, but I still have another couple months of construction or a couple weeks of construction going on. Any good advice on protecting that Duradek surface during construction?
I was installing thermal-ply energy brace was fantastic.
Yeah.
You just got to remember to keep the writing side up.
Oh, okay.
It will bleed. It won't bleed if it gets rained on the side of the house, but if you turn it upside down on a Duradek, it will bleed through.
So leave the plain blank gray down with the writing up.
And shingle it away from the wall and lap it by an inch and tape it onto itself. I mean, you don't have to get crazy with the tape. You can use a zip system tape, Gorilla tape.
Be pretty expensive.
Use a decent tape to put on there. I'd recommend keeping the T-ply about an inch or so off the walls all the way around. So when the trim guy comes in, he doesn't cut the T-ply away and put a razor cut in there.
Yeah, smart. Some more good picks right here.
Yep.
Coating over the metal, that looks really nice. Look at that. That looks like almost like a head flashing they covered on that corner. That looks real nice.
Looks real good.
Some good images there. Let me fast forward because I wanted to talk about this for a minute. We talked about your tile over, but what if you wanted a kind of plaza deck system?
Yeah, that's a protected roof membrane. We have a couple solid colors, a suede and a gray. So you'd use the solid colors underneath there. If it's not going to be visible, you can pretty much use any of the Duradek in there. But if you're going to have decking boards and you don't want to see a pattern flashing through there, you'd use a solid color.
Gotcha.
And it would hold up a lot better in that situation because it's designed to be walked on. So it's going to take the beating of the pedestals far better than a TPO on a fiberboard.
Yeah, or even a PVC roof.
Right.
That's not intended to be a walk surface. Yeah, that's smart. And then look, there's your nice pedestal when it's all said and done.
Yep.
That's kind of cool. And a gray version of it. Talk to me about railings. You guys actually have your own rail system too,
We sure do. We have powder coat aluminum system.
I think is that your rail system that we're seeing there?
I believe it is, yep.
That's pretty cool. I didn't realize you guys had that. Oh, sorry, we're on the tile deck images. Let me fast forward those. There we go. Here's the start of the rail systems.
Yep.
So is that your rail system there?
I believe it is. We got fascia mounted post and we have surface mounted post. We have a topless glass system. We have cable rails. We can pretty much do any custom rail you want.
Very cool. But I like that. No penetration on the roofing whatsoever.
That's ideal.
That's absolutely ideal. Right. Bolted into the structure. Looks like some kind of powder coated aluminum maybe.
And if you do have a tile system on there, it's probably recommended you go with a fascia mounted system so you don't have to penetrate the tile.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. Look at that. No issues with that. That's going to last a long time without any problems. You can do a raised system though, and what's the benefit of this raised system?
It keeps the screws out of the flow of the water. So the only water the screws see is rainwater.
Got it.
So we do.
So if you were doing a post that was mounted onto that raised, talk to me about what you do to make sure those screws were waterproof.
We pre-drill the holes. We fill them with polyurethane caulk, NP1 or Sikaflex. And then you dip the screws in the caulk, and then you put your screws in, and then you plumb your post up, and then you're good to go. But you should make sure you have blocking in there. Those were actually PVC board put in with a bevel on them, and you can actually weld the Duradek to the PVC board.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Wow. Some compatibility there. That's kind of neat.
And that's a surface mounted system. So it can go directly on the Duradek without the raised base plate. Recommended that you think about using a raised base plate. But
it could go straight in if you wanted to.
Yeah, I've seen.
It could be an option.
I've seen a lot of them around. And there was our topless glass, and then we have a
cable rail too.
We have a cable rail. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Talk to me about cleaning. You know, we got this beautiful surface, but it's out in the weather. How do we keep it clean?
Duradek makes the Duradek cleaner. You can get it through Duradek, and I think Amazon even sells it. So you can buy it on Amazon. That's what we recommend that you clean it with, at least 4 times a year. You know, people ask how often should I clean the deck. It's really, if it gets starting to look dirty, it's time to clean it.
Yeah.
The more you clean it, the better off it's going to be. You don't want to use anything else other than that. If you use a Duradek or a goof off, it's going to take the finish right off of there. So you don't want to do that.
Before.
Yep.
It just melts it probably, right? Or does something to the surface.
It just takes the finish right off. So
Yeah.
if you can't find the Duradek cleaner or not sure what to do, they should call a local installer before they attempt to clean it.
Don't be putting some solvent-based cleaners on there. You're gonna mess
Exactly.
things up.
No gas, no turpentine, no paint thinner.
Yeah, not good.
No.
Not
It's
smart.
very durable. The finish doesn't come off as a rule, but you don't. You're going to get it off with some things like that.
Yeah, don't let your son power wash it with the red tip either. I
Yeah,
would suspect,
if
'cause
you power
could get
wash-
through it if you want, if you were dumb enough / smart enough to get through it.
That's right. You can write your name in concrete with a power washer, so you have to.
But you obviously you can hose it off, spray it off. If
Absolutely.
you had a low pressure washer or the big
Yeah.
fan tip, you'd probably be fine.
Absolutely.
But be smart.
Yes,
Don't be dumb.
exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, look, we even have a video of someone washing off. I didn't know that was a video. That's hilarious. 15-year warranty. We mentioned that already. You know, the image that I missed on this slideshow that I wish I would have had is you have an image. Let's see if I can find it real quick of a way to install Duradek that 20 years from now, if we need to replace it, we could replace it without messing with our siding. There is a way, and you could talk to your Duradek installer about running your flashing where your deck meets your wall so that you've got a removable piece in there, and it would make it so that if you came back to replace this Duradek in 20 years, it'd make it really easy to do that and not have to mess with the siding. Did I explain that relatively well?
Run your Duradek up the wall a minimum of 6 inches, and then you put about a 1 foot strip of house wrap moisture barrier over top of that.
Yep.
Then you're going to put a Z flashing down. Okay, you're going to put your trim up underneath that Z flashing, and additional moisture barrier would go down over top of the Z flashing. So 20, 25 years, you want to replace the Duradek, you can remove that PVC trim and run your Duradek up the wall, and that limits how much of the siding and doors you have to take out and everything.
Yeah.
And then you just put your new piece of trim on there.
I'm going to put you on the spot since you mentioned that 20-25 a year. You got a 15-year warranty on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my guess is this thing could easily last 15-20 years,
Mm-hmm.
but you probably could go longer depending on shading, how much sun it gets, what
Right.
climate you're in.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to get way less UV rays than you're down here in Texas.
Right.
If this is on a porch with a roof over it, you may go double that time because it really just doesn't see any sun.
I've been on decks 22, 23 years that's been under a roof, or a lot of it's been shaded, and it looked pretty darn good. Looked like almost a day, and the guy kept it clean.
Yeah.
So we called us back to put a Juliet balcony on their house.
How about that? That's cool.
So
as long as you keep it clean, you're going to be in real good shape.
right.
I think we mentioned this earlier, but give us some cost comparison to either a rubber roof or a TPO roof.
You're gonna spend more money if you just compare the Duradek to a rubber roof.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, like I said, if you put a TPO roof down, is typically, I've seen it priced from $7 to $10 a square foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then a Trex deck system usually runs around $30, $35 a square foot. So now you're at $45 a square foot.
That's expensive.
You're way higher than what a Duradek would be.
Yeah, you're going to be less than half that for a Duradek.
It's going to be way heavier. You're going to have height concerns at the door you have to deal with.
Yep.
So it's going to be in the long run, it's going to be cheaper, less expensive to go with Duradek because you don't have to have like multiple layers. And as soon as you put something down on top of a roof like that, you're going to avoid the warranty.
Yeah.
So,
That's
then if you put a deck over top of it, how are you going to keep it clean underneath there? What if water gets trapped?
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't slope the deck like that, so water just sits there.
Yep. That's not good for the membrane either.
And you can't repair it. You really have to take a lot of the deck apart to repair it.
Yeah. Yeah, not good. If you're building in the South, are there any particular colors that are better, knowing that you might have some pretty good heat build up on a darker color?
We've got our Arctic Quartz is part of our cool line, our Sonoma is part of our cool line, and agate. We have a
Can
new.
you show that to us since we got...
This is right here. This is your cottonwood right there.
Okay.
Okay, that's part of the cool deck.
So part of it, so a much lighter, almost white, but not quite
Yeah,
white
more
color.
lighter than, our dark. It's about 14%, I think, cooler than our darkest color.
Okay.
The Sonoma chip right there is part of it. The Arctic quartz and the agate is right there. So that's part of our cool deck, and I think one of our Okanagan, which I don't think is on this display right here.
And speaking of that, we didn't really talk. We didn't get into any photos of this, but you could actually put this down over concrete, couldn't you?
Yeah, you can. You can put it down over concrete. If it's new concrete, it has to be cured for 30 days. So that has to be that's number one.
Right. So it's not freshly poured concrete.
Right. That's how you glue it down. Put the concrete on wet.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not good.
If you have an existing deck that has concrete on there, needs to be some investigation going on, because there's something that's been in place to waterproof this deck somewhere.
Yeah.
If it's strictly on top, you can grind the concrete down, get it off. You can put the vinyl on top of it.
Same adhesion process as over plywood?
You'd want to use all contact, really. You can use latex. I'd prefer to use all contact on concrete.
Yeah.
And if there's a metal pan or a membrane under the concrete, you cannot put it on top of there, because that will trap the moisture in.
Yep. It's not going to get.
So you don't want to do that. Even like I said, even a corrugated metal pan that the concrete gets poured into, that acts as a vapor barrier. And you don't want to really put it slab on grade. The hydrostatic pressure would cause it to bubble up.
Yeah.
You don't really need it slab on grade. It's not really waterproofing anything.
Right. Any reason why you couldn't use this on a deck that had living space below, but not heated and cooled space below?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That could work too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just at a builder's job site, and they'd use Duradek with full basement space underneath it. And it had that kind of pebble finish that you see on the top there. Man, it looked beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, I couldn't tell that there were seams on it, even though that living area was probably 20 by 30. So if this is a 6-foot roll by 75 feet, they've got 2 or 3 seams in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't tell where they were.
No, it's really hard to tell. The Pebble Beach, that does hide the seams pretty well. The Arctic quartz probably hides it the absolute best, because the white bleed out blends in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're really not going to see it on that.
No, you don't. It's very hard to see the seams.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Gosh, man, we did a good job. I feel like we covered all the main stuff we were supposed to talk about. Let's switch gears a little bit and run through a couple of the questions that some of the people had on the live. By the way, if you're watching this not live, and you want to watch this live in the future so you can ask a question, sign up in the description below. We'll have a link to our newsletter, which will tell you when we've got new webinars coming out, so you can watch this live and ask a question. So Michael Lydia says, what's the best way to fix a cut or damaged section?
You put a Band-Aid on it, much like that post you saw that has that split on the outside. So you would actually take a strip of Duradek, and you try to get it in the same direction if it is a directional Duradek, and you would weld it to that. You'd clean off the area, make sure everything is glued down, and then you put your Band-Aid on there.
Okay.
But just a 3/4 to 1 inch strip, and it extends at least an inch past the cut on each side, and it gets welded to it.
What are the installers cleaning with to clean that strip off and make sure it's virgin
A
material?
Duradek cleaner.
A Duradek
Yeah,
cleaner.
they'll
Okay.
clean that off, and
Gotcha.
then they'll completely get it off of there.
And I'm assuming that Duradek cleaner doesn't have any solvents in it, probably,
No,
right?
no,
That's going to eat into it.
not at all.
Yeah, it's going to be more mild, more like a dish soap, I
Right,
suspect.
yeah.
Something like that.
Yep.
Okay. So that's totally doable, Michael, to answer your question. Here's a funny question that doesn't necessarily require an answer, but I'm going to say it anyways. Jane Swan says, overhang plus awning mat? Really? My contractor doesn't do awnings, but thanks for all you do. I appreciate that, Jane. That's very kind of you. I'm a belt and suspenders guy. And so I like to put my belt on. I like to put the suspenders on. I like to put a raincoat on. I like to put a umbrella over me when I'm out in the rain. I like to put galoshes on. I just, I've been doing it long enough. I've seen enough failures that it's just not worth it. And a quick, back to the old days failure. I'll end the webinar here. We got 5 minutes left to tell you an old school story. You'll appreciate this story. My very first flat roof that I ever did, Bill, was here in Austin, Texas. Prior to that time, I built nothing but sloped roofs and honestly nothing but asphalt shingled roofs because I worked for a big national production builder for many years. So I moved here almost 20 years ago now. And I had a little bit of a young builder swagger, like, oh, I've seen lots. I've been building for almost, 10, 11 years now. I've seen it all. Like, I totally know what I'm doing. So I get this plan from an architect that had all these flat roofs and scuppers and stucco and honestly things that I hadn't done before. But I thought, oh, I'm good. I totally know the details. I'll be fine. This is a recession job. This is 2008, 9, something like that, right? So my client says to me, Matt, I want you to get 3 bids on every phase of the project. And I'm fighting for work. I really was pretty. I was in pretty dire straits, frankly. It was a tough time of life. I did what they asked for. I got 3 bids on everything. So I got 3 bids from 3 different roofers. And this is a house that had a bunch of flat roofs, including one that had a deck over top of a flat roof, some other flat roofs that had scuppers, and then also some pitched metal roof. 3 bids, one from a roofer in town who's really well recognized, great roofer. He was the highest bidder. One from another roofer that was pretty good roofer, but he was probably 10% less. And then another bid from another roofer that was like 35 or 40% less, right? And I didn't have any choice. I had to take him. Well, come to find out, this is his first flat roof too. He'd never done one before. He thought he knew how to do them and bid the job for me, but he'd never done one before. Well, you probably know where the story ends here. Almost every scupper on the house leaked. He had caulked his scuppers rather than done a coated scupper like we're talking about here. And he was a roofer that just wasn't well trained ultimately. This is an asphalt shingle guy that hadn't been trained in flat roofs, didn't know the product, didn't know the installation. So client moves in. I'm getting all kinds of texts and emails about roof leaks and scupper leaks. And I'm out there like with a flashlight in the rain trying to figure out where the problems were. In the end, I ripped all their roofs off and replaced them on my dime, not their dime. My roofer that I'd hired was out of business. It was during the recession. And turns out his insurance certificate he gave me was not a good one. He'd falsified it with a little whiteout, and I didn't realize it. So I had no insurance to collect. It was on my dime. I had to pay to rip the entire roof off, and it just taught me a lesson. Roofing is not something that you need the lowest cost bidder for. It is not something to save money on. You need a really good roofer. You need a really good product. You need to do your research. And so with that being said, I really appreciate Duradek taking the time to come in today, teaching us the details, really showing it to us. And I love that the head trainer for Duradek is here, Bill, showing us this, because now when you contact a Duradek company, you know that Bill has probably been the one who's actually trained them on this process. And this is what they do for a living. Duradek is a product they're putting down on a daily, weekly basis. So they know how to really nail the details. That's worth every penny for you as a builder, for you as a homeowner, for you in any stage of the building process. Architects, if you're interested in learning more from these guys, give them a call. They got great people. They'll also send you these binders. I know it's the age of the internet where you can find anything you want on the web, but I sure like having an actual sample of something in my hand. And when they send you this binder, you're actually going to get real samples of their product. Here's tile deck. Here's what it looks like. I can touch and feel and see how thick and durable it is. So this is a binder that I would really like to have on my shelf. And I believe Bill's leaving these for me, right, Bill?
Yep, absolutely.
And now I can also see all their color samples and a small size. This is good stuff, people. I really appreciate Duradek putting this on. Call them, email them. You can get to duradek.com to get more information. Bill, thanks for joining us, brother.
Oh, I appreciate you having us.
Really kind of you.
Really good.
Guys, if you're not currently a subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content here on the Build Show on a Tuesday and a Friday, but these webinars we produce on an off day, we do them live. Click that link in the description so you can sign up for our newsletter and find out what they are. With that being said, we'll see you guys next time on the Build Show.